Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes. We have a dialogue on climate change. Yes, we are collaborating with Central Bank of Bangladesh. They are joining, but before that, we want to start. And yes, uh, Mr. Lutfur Rahman Sani Bhai already joined with us. Uh,
Hello.
I yes, hello. First, I would like to give chance Professor Fred Philip.
Oh, thank you, Sharif. And good evening, and thank you for allowing Tondo Fellows, Sheridan Tatsuno, and myself to address you tonight. Bangladesh produces fewer carbon emissions than most countries, but it's one of the countries most vulnerable to climate change. That's an unfortunate and quite unfair situation. The country expects increasing rainfall, rising sea levels, in fact, some of the world's fastest rising sea levels, and stronger storms as a result, with the impacts of each of these rippling through the economy and the society. Some estimates have it that these impacts are going to destroy a fifth of Bangladesh's land and displace tens of millions of people. So, in the few minutes allotted to me here, I'll address Bangladesh's challenges and opportunities in public health, migration, technology, and innovation, especially as these pertain to climate change and central banking. And I'll conclude with a short list of recommendations. Uh, in terms of migration, the prospect of so many climate displaced persons naturally makes us think of immigration possibilities. I recognize the added difficulty of this question due to the million immigrants Bangladesh has absorbed from neighboring Myanmar. Current poor conditions with India make that country an unlikely target for legal immigration. China is unwelcoming, claims to have secure borders, but ironically, China's border with Myanmar is notoriously porous, as news of the drug trade makes it clear. Some Indian Ocean island nations are buying land or immigration permission from climate safer nations. Bangladesh's huge population makes this impractical or unaffordable. Under these circumstances, drastically increased urbanization within Bangladesh seems inevitable. City planning will be key to the future, and that city planning must be done with due regard to maintaining tourism revenue. And that in turn depends on keeping tourist sites relatively comfortable to visit, even when the heat is increasing. And that must be done with sustainable building and paving materials. Many of these are innovative, but please choose carefully because tourists are drawn to neighborhoods that are aesthetic. Whether the neighborhoods are innovative is secondary. Now, public health. Bangladesh's extraordinary population density makes epidemics a particularly acute problem, especially, and I hope you'll excuse my bluntness, especially with the nation's underdeveloped sanitation and healthcare infrastructure. Like the Netherlands and like Florida in the United States, inundation comes more from neighboring countries' runoff than from seepage from a rising water table than from sea incursion. When the water table rises toward the surface, it brings with it E. coli from shallowly buried waste, plus locally present contaminants like arsenic, and these breed disease. So what's needed here are first, modern resilient sewer systems built in the regions most likely to survive the rising seas. Second, good use of the learning from the COVID pandemic and applying these learnings to capability for quick delivery of treatment and appropriate antibiotics. And third, better education for the general populace on matters of climate change. education so that displaced families will not try to farm remaining land that may be marginal and unsustainable. Education so that they will seek modern medicine rather than folk medicine, and education about the dangers of contaminated water. In terms of technology and innovation, first, please resist the urge to build seawalls, except if there's site-specific scientific evidence that they would help. Seawalls prevent waterborne toxins from draining off into the sea and can do more harm than good. Jakarta is building a seawall, but Indonesia is hedging its bets by moving all the national government functions to the island of Java. Next, runoff from the Himalaya snowpack will diminish. It would be wise to devise diverse ways of capturing rainwater. This is a problem shared by Australia and by the Western United States. Sea surface temperatures in the shallow Bay of Bengal have significantly increased, and this in turn creates more violent weather. Answers may be floating cities like the one being built in Busan, Korea, both to shade the sea surface and provide human habitat. It may be feasible to bring cold deep sea water to the surface, and it may not be feasible. But these are the kinds of creative ideas that should not be discouraged. Bangladesh has strengths it may rely on as matters develop. The Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100 outlines most water-related issues very admirably. Good international relations with neighboring countries like Bhutan and distant countries like the Netherlands can be leveraged. The Bangladesh Delta Plan appears well done and flexible, but it makes no explicit connection to public health. And these two issues are very closely related. So I would say a corresponding plan for public health is needed. I'll take a moment to describe the situation in Miami, Florida, where the water situation is remarkably similar to Bangladesh's and quite as foreboding, with the exception that healthcare in Miami is excellent. Miami, says the Economist magazine, is, quote, loved by the mega rich, has a strong tax base, and an economy dependent on their threatened real estate. A rational state would scramble to save it. Yet Florida's policy response to its inundations is defined by short-termism, vested interests, inadequate resources, a Hobbesian scrum of federal, state, county, and city agencies, and denial, end quote. The magazine puts much blame on the political party that has run Florida since 1999, calling it an impediment to cutting emissions. The previous governor that elected was a climate change denier. So let me finish here with 7 specific to-dos. And one comment here about doing and action. We have another problem in the United States that might find an echo in Bangladesh, and that is that we have one faction. This has to do with the COVID emergency, but there are many parallels to the climate emergency. We have one faction of people who refused any COVID protection measures. They're saying what happens will be God's will, God will protect us. And then another faction of people that said, yes, God sent us masks and vaccines. So I don't know how, of course, you at the central bank know far more about your country's culture than I do, but that may be something that you'll need to work out. So number 1 recommendation, invest like BlackRock, not like HSBC. This means lend only to companies that have verifiably active climate protection programs. This helps ensure that when the loans are later repaid, the world will still exist, and the central bank itself is more likely to remain in existence. Number 2, educate Bangladeshis about climate change. Number 3, plan for sanitation and health crises. Number 4, fund the staff for chief heat officer departments in Dhaka, Chittagong, other cities. Number 5, plan to capture massive amounts of rainwater. Number 6, encourage innovative thinking, international scientific collaborations, and public-private partnerships that will be attractive to competent private partners from the financial and risk perspectives. Number 7, reward jurisdictions that harmonize laws, standards, and codes with one another. Now, thank you very much for your kind attention.
Sharif, you muted. Sharif, yeah, go.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Fred Philip. Because of time issues, Professor Adrian joining from Australia. I think now it's around 2:30 a.m. I want to give chance Professor Adrian. He is also general chair for our conference, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. He support a lot of activities for World Talent Economy Forum. Professor Adrian.
Hello, good night from Australia, and good day to America and other countries. So this is a critical problem, not just for Bangladesh, but for the whole world. And actually, this one of the very important things is for the Bangladesh government to join and be part of the international treaties regarding climate change, and with the countries working together is how we will in fact affect the climate change. And just now, the professor speaking mentioned about the pandemic. That's probably the biggest issue in the world since 2020. And actually, there's been some proposal, some theory that this pandemic may be a result of climate change. And how that is that when the nature, the natural animals have to change to the different, their natural habitat is being lost, and they have to interact with humans more because they have to leave their normal natural habitat because of climate change. And this could be the root cause of the pandemic, which was made the coronavirus may have jumped from animal to human because of the fact that animals have to be living in the close or nearby to or in the human environment. Of course, nobody knows. It's just a theory, but this does have logic to it, and it just goes to show you that it's not just the things that we normally think about, like climate change, that we normally worry about, but actually this could affect the health of the public health of the entire world, and could have been the cause of this pandemic, and maybe it could cause the future pandemics. So this is very important factor to think that climate change may in fact have many more effects than we initially expect. So, and interestingly, people always talk about the temperature of the Earth is rising, but when you do some of the mathematical modeling, this in fact can lead to more severe cold weather in places. So that's a very interesting point. That even though you get global warming, some places will get very, very severe cold during winter. So the climate change has many more side effects than we may initially expect, and so it is a very, very, very important issue to think about, and this is an issue that we have to think about on a kind of global scale. And interestingly, right now we are in a economic crisis, and prices of oil are rising, and I think prices of gas have almost doubled in some parts of America, and actually, again, you can see that the reliance on the fossil fuels can bring about big economic pain, as we are beginning to face now. People are saying we're entering a global recession. So the summary is that climate change has many more effects than we initially think. Not just temperature, but also public health and the economy. So major things that we need to think about. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor, for joining today's sessions. And I want to invite you all because we are actually organizing a very big conference in India next year, 27 March to 29 March. Professor Adrian David Chiok, also General Chair for this conference, and we want to invite all of you in our conference. And hopefully it will be a very good initiative for developing nation, especially in South Asia, because we are bringing a lot of innovations and technology inside South Asia. So Central Bank of Bangladesh and Green Tech Foundations, and we can collaborate together, and we can work together for research and innovations. In that situations, I want to give chance Professor Rob.
Well, okay, so with climate change, we've got a serious problem affecting the planet. The most aggressive effort that I've seen to try to address it is the Earth 2 effort, predominantly because what it's going to try to do is try to create a hierarchy of solutions for climate change that are ranked by effectiveness and cost. So the most effective, least costly would be towards the top. The least effective and most costly would be towards the bottom. That provides a map, if you will, to how you could address climate change on a global basis. And I'm willing to bet you the world's going to look at that list and say, yeah, no, we're not doing that. But it will provide a hierarchy and the potential to actually address the problem. The underlying issue right now for us is, one, clearly not everybody's on the same page internationally. Two, China is providing, in terms of greenhouse gases, the biggest problem, responsible, at least at the last count, for half of the world's greenhouse gases. US is about a quarter. Everybody else is another quarter. So dealing with climate change as a small country, yeah, unless it's a part of a cooperative effort that would include certainly China and most likely the US, you're not going to make any progress. You'll be impacted by climate change, but you won't be able to do anything about it. So for a small country like Bangladesh, their hierarchy of things to do should be ranked a little different. The still ranked by effectiveness and cost, but focus more on mitigating the effects of climate change than trying to solve it. That's because Bangladesh simply doesn't have the size or resources to solve the underlying problem, and that allows the government's resources to be prioritized to where they're going to benefit the populace the most, both near and long term. And that allows the country to become more resilient and able to survive climate change over time, given it is not large or powerful enough to stop it. So the mitigation focus for a small country, whether it be Bangladesh or somebody else, would probably be the better path than the corrective path, because it's simply of scale. Now, that doesn't mean Bangladesh should collaborate and cooperate on the global efforts. Certainly should, but the impact, their impact will be far greater on their citizens if they focus on mitigating the results of climate change as opposed to going after the causes. Now, as we look at climate change broadly, the other issue that has to be dealt with is the amount of misinformation that surrounds the subject, and every country should be aggressively looking at ways to reduce or at least annotate misinformation so the populace isn't misled. Now, the danger of doing this continues to be that governments tend to look at misleading information very differently than the scientific community does, and may in some cases find that information that is misleading they want to be true, and information that is true they want to be misleading, and governments tend to have a very poor record with being able to delineate the two things. And that does suggest that if you're going after correct information, the body that does that should be able to act independently of the government and particularly political parties, and be staffed by people that are, one, expert on the subject matter, and two, can articulate publicly both the problem and what they're working on to fix it. These elements aren't in place well in any country at the moment, and so the end result is even moving towards mitigation becomes problematic because the information stream isn't pure and certainly not trustworthy. So fixing the underlying issues with regard to misinformation, focusing on mitigating the problem if you're a small country, and then third, working collaboratively with the rest of the world, and probably also promoting the Earth 2 approach of doing that same hierarchical listing of effectiveness and cost, so that you can make progress, or make meaningful progress early on, thus supporting the further progress later on. People get very frustrated when they talk about things for years and nothing seems to happen. And to move this ball forward, things need to happen so people become convinced that they can affect change, not just suffer through it. That's my point.
Mhm. Thank you, sir. Now I want to give chance Mr. Sharif and Tatsuna.
Right, very good. Hi, Sheridan Tatsuna from San Francisco. You know, the global south obviously has one of the biggest challenges because you get the worst climate disasters and impacts, and you're not causing as much carbon emissions. So there's that whole north-south global issue where the north has not contributed as much money as it could. And one of the big problems, I think, is that we need to redefine climate in the way. Right now, it's viewed as a short-term cost with no consideration of the benefits, short-term or long-term. So it's like one-sided accounting. Actually, I would call it misaccounting. And I think it's a disingenuous approach that fossil fuel companies have imposed. But you need to look at the costs. For example, a 5.0 typhoon hit Japan and Guam. It stopped the whole country, Japan, killed a lot of people, $5 billion damage. It stopped the economy, which was delayed, $100 billion. Right? So that's the real cost. California got hit, $40 to $50 billion in damage from wildfires. We were looking at trying to save $160 million in lost forestry jobs. So we were looking at the wrong numbers. So I think right off the bat, we need to look at the costs of damage to Bangladesh, and that is the true accounting. And anything short of, let's say, 40 or $50 billion in California, you're making money. You could spend up to that on wildfire and still be ahead of the game. And it's going to go north. All right. So I think misaccounting is a bad one. Now, the other one, too, is for, the ESG, environmental social governance funds, have 120, $50 trillion is sitting on it because there are no clear metrics. You have the UN SDGs, but they're trying to develop the KPIs, the key performance indicators, at a local level to measure. Because if you want to do accounting to raise money, you have to have metrics. You can't just ask for money and then assume it's going to work. So right now, as part of your STEAM education, I think at the local level, the cities, you don't have to wait for the national. But I think Fred's idea of looking at all your opportunities, and he laid out a really good list of things like rainwater capture, heat officers, and look at that and begin to develop metrics that you can use to begin to measure it as part of your education, your STEAM education and public education. It should be very clear, and then go to the ESG funds and say, here, we think we could test it on a small scale in the local towns and bring in capital that way. And just bypass the nations because they're not going to move anyway until they see metrics. So I think the private sector can move faster and the local cities can move faster. I'm releasing a book next week. And the other thing too is about how cities can save the planet. Here are the metrics. Always look at the numbers. Cities consume 80% of all energy as buyers now on the demand side, and they emit 70% of the carbon. Ergo, we will win or lose the carbon battle in the cities. Now, the good part, the cities are closer to citizens than nations that are usually compromised and bought off by the oil industries. So I think the mayors of all towns and cities should unite. And my book describes an 8-year mission, Earthshot, based on the moonshot, how 10,000 cities led by the C40, and Bangladesh could be a leader, how they can begin to do what Fred says at the local level, just begin to organize and quantify everything to qualify for the ESG funding and bypass the nations, because you don't need to go to the nations for everything. And I think we're going to see a groundswell of innovation, because I'm an urban planner by training. The best innovation always starts at the grassroots. It works at grassroots and goes up. And usually nonprofits, students, young people, innovators, those are your future leaders, the people who are sitting there listening today, not the old guys sitting at the top. They won't move for decades. Most of them have, I'll be frank, most of them have given up. They're too old. They'll be dead in 5 or 10 years. So they frankly don't care. And so that's one of the problems I see. And so I think the good part about organizing at the local level with mayors, towns, and citizens and young people is that I'm a parent. Most parents worry about their children, their grandparents. So if you get the young people involved, you get parents and grandparents, and you can have a multi-generational team working together to the schools to educate everybody. And I do agree 100% that education will make or break your country. And I worked with India 30 years ago, and they wanted to build their software industry based on young, educated people, and it worked. Bangladesh can turn a lemon into lemonade by really focusing on education and training everybody, because if, we have a saying, you turn lemon into lemonades. You can take your disasters and develop solutions which you can sell worldwide as consultants, manufacturers, and this notion in the 70s of suitable technologies. You don't bring in technology from the West because it's too expensive anyway, and you just become dependent. Rather, develop your own technologies at the local level on a small scale, and then test it. And that's where you get the metrics in your quantity, and you get funding. And then once you figure that out, then you can begin to share it with the rest of the global South and even the North. And so I think that's the kind of innovation that the North is looking for. We're looking for innovation from the South. We want to see, because one, it's more cost effective. For every dollar, you get a lot more services and products in the global South, whereas here in Silicon Valley, a dollar doesn't go anywhere. It's too expensive to do anything. So I don't think that we can see a lot of really groundbreaking innovation at the ground level in a very expensive global north. So I think that's the contribution that I think that you can make, is view yourself as climate leaders for the global South. Just as India said to me 30 years ago in Bangalore, we want to be the global leader in software development. And at the time I said, these guys are crazy. But one thing I did know from India, I said, how badly do you want it? And they said, we really, really want it badly. We have total unemployment, no jobs. And I said, well, then we have smart people. I said, then educate people, work together, and focus on becoming the leader in software. And if you do, you might have a chance. And it took them 10 years. Now, Bangladesh, because of the real time, everything on time, you could probably, literally change the whole nation, you're thinking, in 2 to 3 years. The whole nation and the whole global South. Because remember, if Bangladesh moves, everybody's going to be watching you. All the young people will be watching you. So I want you to become champions of change, not just victims. And that's what I'd like to basically contribute, is to encourage you to lead. Just lead and be a nation we can all be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your excellent speech. Now I want to give chance Mr. Donald.
Hi. Well, very interesting. Always love listening to my colleagues here. They've always got brilliant things to say. I want to start out by complimenting Bangladesh on a lot of things that they've done. I mean, because they created latrines and they moved their sanitation past India. I mean, they're much better now than India. They did a gigantic program to get people to stop going to the bathrooms, and it vastly improved the health of the people in Bangladesh. So I think people in Bangladesh are very aware that that's an issue, and they've done some incredibly innovative things to address it. Something that, as Sheridan was saying, that you want the world to look at what they're doing. Well, that's one example of what they've done. Another thing that Bangladesh has done is created a warning system for the floods during the monsoons, where people get text messages and they can get to higher ground, and that's wound up saving many, many lives. But I agree with what Rob and others have been saying, which is that the issue is really mitigation right now, more than being able to stem the issue, because especially for smaller countries. I mean, in the United States and China, we should really be looking at ways to reduce our carbon output, or in the developed world, Europe too. But in the less developed world, the people are getting the damage, but not as much of the benefits of using a lot of energy. So we talk about mitigation, and we all know it's a good thing. And Fred mentioned that seawalls weren't necessarily effective. In some cases they are effective, in some cases they're not. So the question gets to be is, when are they effective and when aren't they effective? When we're trying to make a decision about spending money and doing something and investing in something, how do we make that decision? And the most recent issue of Science magazine was devoted to the question of how to how to do global research, or the issues of doing global research in these kinds of things. Right now, the United Nations does have some projects that they're starting, but it's very nascent. So I think it's something that you hear me say a lot on this show, which is a lot of matter of listening. But what has to happen is that the world has to start developing, and is starting to develop, global standards. Sheridan talks about metrics, and it's all well and good to measure this in one place and then measure it in another place, but if there's no commonality in what you're measuring, you can't compare the two measurements. So what's winding up happening, and it's important to happen, is that global standards are starting to be developed. It is a global problem, but the key is for all of us, and no one is going to do the right thing every time. I mean, no one knows what's going to happen. No one knows exactly what's going to be right. We have to be just kind of like life, where we try things and we learn and we share with each other our mistakes. And because of that, we actually make progress. So where we really need to go is to create your networks of resources within your academic and your research community that can, like in Silicon Valley, there's a very, very strong relationship between research and the actual technology that's developed. A lot of the technology that get famous, like Google, was originally invented at Stanford, and then the people who invented it quit and started a company. That's very, very common, the whole thing of public-private partnerships. But basically what everyone needs to do is to start making sure that they're as aware as possible of what everyone else is doing. And there are organizations through the United Nations that are doing that. We talk about education, and there's a tendency to to always kind of focus on certain kinds of things. But in Bangladesh, for an instance, and I mean, this isn't the only country that's like that, a lot of people are farmers, and they're getting displaced. If they get displaced from their farms and they can't live on their farms anymore because the water table's rising and there's saltwater intrusion and all the various kinds of problems, where do they go? They go to the cities. But when they get to the cities, they don't have the skills to live in the cities. So something that needs to happen, not just in Bangladesh, but everywhere, is people have to start planning for the movements of populations, and part of the planning has to be to understand what kind of jobs those people can do and how they can live in the new places that they're living. And again, that's not something that can be done. In that case, that's not something that can really be done locally. It's something that we have to learn from each other all over the world, and communicate and become aware of the standards, become aware of the research that's being done, find the centralized places that are being developed for research, and use the new networks that are being developed right now for planning, because we're all in this together and everyone is making mistakes everywhere, and we really need to be able to be cognizant of what everyone else is doing so that we can be successful, or as successful as possible at what we try to do.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Mr. Frank.
Honey, that was excellent, Donald. So, speaking on education and understanding the problem properly, there's the critical importance of understanding the science behind climate can't be understated, and right now we are not doing a very good job of that. So half of the equation is electromagnetic radiation, and to properly understand electromagnetic radiation, you have to understand quantum field theory, quantum electrodynamics in particular. It's so bear with me here. A couple terms we got to clarify before we can really have a grasp of the problem. One is energy. What is energy? Energy is a property of a thing manifest as the capacity to perform work, so to cause motion or interact with atoms, or interact with anything. And another thing is light. We think of light as a wave, but a wave is just a harmonic oscillator over a period of time. And with light, you can think of it as a collection of harmonic oscillators over a set period of time, and each individual oscillator is a photon. Now, and another term we don't have a solid grasp on in the general populace is heat. What is heat? A lot of the material will refer to heat as a vibrational mode where the excitation of the atoms, they'll start vibrating or jiggling. Well, that's an inadequate description of the process taking place. It's what's happening is you remember the simplistic model of the atom from high school. You got the proton, the neutron, and the electron. Well, the electron is the star of the show, and what it does is it absorbs incoming photons, and then it jumps to an excited state orbital. And when the atoms are in excited state, that's the process that's taking place. It's also the same way we see the color and refraction and the absorption spectrum and emission spectrum of a material. So it's critically important to understand how this process takes place. It's one thing that we often struggle with is our inherent biological bias. So a lot of people view light and heat as different things, but they're not. So from the radio all the way up to the most energetic gamma frequency, the entire electromagnetic spectrum, the force carrier for that is the photon. So to an electron, there's no difference from visible to infrared it all depends on the frequency at which the photon is oscillating at, whether or not that's in harmony with the frequency the electron's oscillating at, and all integer multiples of the Planck constant, because it's a quantum system. And it has to be to properly understand the system. Those are critical things that need to be understood. Now, the process for absorbing photons in the atmosphere is the same as the process for absorbing photons everywhere else. If you follow the journey of a photon from its creation to its ultimate end here on the planet, so it starts off in the center of the sun through a process called stellar nucleosynthesis. Fusion of two hydrogen atoms forming a helium atom. The excess energy is that photon, but the matter of the sun, that plasma, is so condensed. It's so superheated and condensed that photon gets absorbed and re-emitted like a game of Plinko. And it takes on average of 800,000 to 1 million years for that photon to go from the center of the sun to the surface of the sun, where it then can be released into the vacuum, and then it takes the 8-minute journey to Earth, where it starts that process all over again. Only the loose gaseous state of our atmosphere, it's most of the times it's missing the atoms completely. Now, when it comes to this equation, the only part of this that changes is the matter density, right? So and that's the key thing we have to remember here is I'm not a climate change denier by any means, and I'd like to clarify that I'm not a denier by any means. What I am saying though is we are currently our understanding of the problem here is wrong. The consensus that it's the impetus behind human accelerated climate change is greenhouse gas emissions from industrial output. That's not the driver. If you think about it, so the number of atoms per area or per unit of area cubed, the more atoms in there, the more electrons there'll be, the more capacity there is to absorb photons. That's the key indicator that needs to be understood here. So the cities themselves, they're think about it like putting a rock on a fire. If you're sitting there baking in the sun all day and absorbing that heat, they're acting like a heat battery. And the reason that the greenhouse gas theory was even even postulated in the first place was they took measurements from the cities, they took measurements from the ocean, and they took measurements from the rainforest, and they seen that all temperatures were increasing universally, although significantly higher in the cities. And so it couldn't have been just a local phenomenon. It had to be a global, which the only thing that connects those three things is the atmosphere, right? So that and that would have made a lot of sense. But if they understood quantum electrodynamics and the way atoms interact with electromagnetic radiation, they would have understood that well, anything blue, black, or green is going to absorb not just the entire visible red frequency photons, but also all the harmonizing infrared frequency photons, right? Like, so they're all those things are heat sinks. The ocean is the biggest heat sink we have. Cities, because they're black and the mass density is so dense that they're a heat sink, and so is the rainforest. Although the plants have a special way that the infrared only penetrates the first two layers of most photosynthesizing plants, and then they use a complex process to lead off the heat through that. But the point is that the consensus was made on inadequate understanding of the physical process taking place, and that is going to be the death of us if we don't adjust our understanding immediately. We can beat this. Well, there's nothing we can do about the photons being absorbed into the ocean. We can't cover the ocean. The sea ice is going to continue to recede simply because there's less of it there to reflect those photons back into the vacuum. But we can thermally decouple the cities, and we can do it in a manner that's profitable as well. So what we have to do is build a network of canopies enclosing our city street networks, kind of like Fremont Ave in Vegas, as they have to be thermally reflective. And the reason is because if we just painted the roads white or did thermally reflective road surfacing material, not only would it just get dirty with the vehicle traffic and traffic on it rapidly and need cleaning all the time, but during direct sunlight it would be like blisteringly hot. So the safest and most effective means would be building a raised canopy network that's thermally reflective, so we can bounce those photons back into space. And now we can offset the needs, the power requirements of the cities by loading it up with solar voltaics. As long as underneath the cells it's thermally reflective, the planet will still be able to enter the natural cooling cycle. Like the natural cooling cycle for the planet is the natural landscape reaches thermodynamic equilibrium fairly soon after sundown. With desert climates where the color of the landscape is not conducive to heat, it's almost immediately. Like everybody knows, the deserts go from sandy and blisteringly hot to overnight, as soon as the sun drops, to damn near below freezing, very, very quickly. And that's the natural process for the day-night cycle of the planet. But right now, we're not letting that process happen with the cities acting as essentially a heat battery and re-emitting that heat throughout a longer period over time. The most famous equation in all of physics, E equals mc squared, was originally written m equals E over c squared, because it was originally a way to think about what mass is. Mass isn't the thing itself; it's a property of a thing. It's the total cumulative energy of an object, all the kinetic energy and potential energy combined, the total cumulative energy, right? And right now, the energetic capacitance of our cities is per equal area of volume. It's like 1.94 million times more capacitance to absorb photons than the atmosphere. The atmosphere is only a millionth the mass of the planet below it, and of that only 0.04% is carbon dioxide. So I'm not saying that carbon in the atmosphere doesn't have energetic capacitance, and I'm not saying that by any means. That would be ridiculous. What I am saying is the ground underneath it has over 1 million times more, and we have failed to understand that, and put out terms like the urban island heat effect. None of those things adequately describe the actual system taking place, because none of them take in quantum electrodynamics or quantum field theory to begin with. And when half of the equation is a field of study that climate scientists don't communicate with on average, because why would they? Why would anybody communicate with part of it? That's not part of the system. Yeah, it is. It's a major part of the system, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We can, we have a lot of the issues that we're attributing to climate change currently are poor land management. Now, Dr. Elaine Ingham, she's one of the world's foremost soil biologists. A direct quote from her is, "Drought is not a weather issue; it's a land management issue," and that's very true. Like we're about 100 years removed from the Dust Bowl of the Great Depression, and that a lot of people have even tried to attribute to the climate, but it wasn't. That was the rise of mechanized agriculture and poor farming practices. They pounded monoculture into the soil so hard that the soil microbiome, all the mycorrhizal fungi and the nematodes, all the bacterial life and whatnot in the soil, that all the binding agents, it was all destroyed. It wasn't able to propagate, and because of that, the soil system collapsed. Without that soil microbiome, that's all the entire means dirt has to become soil, and for water abatement and retention, that is the system at work. And every time we just take out a order of life in that chain, we're taking out. It's not just affecting that thing. Like, we use pesticides, so we kill that pest species, but that pest species had a predator species. That predator species had another predator species, and then you follow that chain all the way up to us. And it all goes back right to that mycorrhizal fungi feeding the root systems in that top 6 inches of topsoil. And it's also the thing that binds the topsoil together. So all these issues like industrial runoff causing algae blooms and dead spots in the ocean, those are all land management practice issues. Now, fortunately, regenerative agriculture has been getting a lot of momentum here in the last while, which is just nothing but good news there, because it's about time the world woke up to shifting the way we produce food. My company, Grow North, we're developing growing systems for outdoor vertical in-field regenerative production agriculture. So we're taking this to the next inevitable end. Even the pandemic, in 2019, when we started this company, we'd seen the pandemic coming. We thought we would have 10 years, but we for sure seen the pandemic coming. And it wasn't from climate, it was from food scarcity. Where it originated from, the country it originated from has a massive, issue with industry of counterfeit food, like plastic grains of rice, and we are so critically linked to the soil and our food supplies that we can't separate the global economy from the farm without the whole model falling apart. That's what I wanted to bring up. Thanks for having me. And
thank you, Mr. Frank. Now I request Mr. Lutfur Rahman Sani on behalf of Central Bank of Bangladesh.
Thank you.
Mr. Lutfur Rahman Sani, can you hear me? I think internet issues. I want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I request Professor Adrian David Chiok. Can you unmute, please?
Sorry. Thank you for this excellent session, and I think in the future it'd be great to see the academics, politicians, and business people, etc., speaking in this forum. So I think the forum, the great thing is building up the dialogue with Bangladesh and about this very important issue of the climate change. And so before someone mentioned about the software industry, and climate change can also maybe offer some very good opportunity in terms of the technologies of clean energy or hydrogen, batteries, for example.
I'm extremely sorry, Mr. Sharif. Actually,
Uh,
I dropped the
Dr. Lutfur Rahman,
elect-
Dr. Lutfur Rahman, can you hear me?
Can you hear
Professor,
me?
yes, I'm coming back to you after Professor Adrian. Just give me few minutes, Professor Adrian. Yes.
So, sorry about that. Yes, I was just saying, just like the software industry, maybe climate change technologies can offer jobs and opportunities to Bangladesh. And I think the government can really help to identify some areas which Bangladesh could do well or lead in green and clean energy technology. So I think it's this is a very important start, and let's have more dialogue with Bangladesh. And also, one thing is we can take care of the environment at the same time, maybe producing new industries and new jobs in Bangladesh, which could be of great benefit to the people. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you to the Sharif for organizing this excellent forum. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Fred Philip. Can you unmute, please?
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good dialogue here. I also admire Bangladesh's latrine program that Donald mentioned, and their flood control methods. But I really would like to emphasize that those have been adequate for present circumstances, but they're not going to be adequate in the more extreme conditions of the future. The latrines are shallow and the water table is rising. Soon the latter will overtake the former, and there will be a serious contamination problem. As for flood warnings, it was last week, was it, in Germany? A flood that was more powerful than any in the past simply washed away the flood warning sensors and transmitters. So now their scientists are looking at ways to fine tune seismic sensors, earthquake sensors, to which are remote, not in the flood path, to predict the floods. So the current initiatives have been very admirable, but they're not going to suffice for the future. Now, as for the seniority of leadership, speaking as an old guy myself, yeah, some old people are senile and some are not, and some, as Sheridan said, are going to just give up, and others are not. But I read something today or yesterday about Nancy Pelosi in the U.S. House of Representatives, and her problem is neither of those, but rather that she grew to her political maturity in an era of bipartisanship and compromise in the United States legislature. And she is so conditioned by that she's not able to see the absolutely intransigent polarization in today's American politics. So they say that she's an exhibiting unfounded optimism. Okay, optimism is good, but not when it's all based on things that happened before 1980. So we our seniority and committee chairmanship systems in the legislature uh, just exist to encourage the older you are, the more powerful you are, and it's got to change. And I hope that in the countries that comprise the audience to this video cast that it isn't like that, or if it is, that it changes. Thank you. Those are my concluding remarks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Dr. Lutfur Rahman.
Sorry, I beg apologize. I was disconnected for technical reason. Actually, I was enjoying the speeches of brilliant speakers today. And really, it's a fantastic gathering. And I would like to thank Mr. Sharif for I've been inviting me in this gathering. Very good gathering. So already very we discussed about the climate change and the environmental sustainability issues, especially the recommendations from Professor Fred Phillips. I loved his recommendations, and I already requested in the group masses to share these recommendations so that we can discuss in our high-level forum for the decision makers, because it's very interesting, and definitely if we can follow these recommendations, it will be good for the country to face the challenges of climate. So I don't want to prolong my speech with the literary discussion, but I would address very focal issues, especially um, the Bangladeshi people. We, as we are facing the climate actions or reactions for a long time, and that's why. And now we don't want to take the challenges as a problem for our country. We want to make it as an opportunity for our country. So we, with the next generation and the young people, they want to create the challenges and convert these challenges as a opportunity for our country. So that's why we focused on from the Green Tech Foundation. I am leading one. I mean, as one organization is called Green Tech Foundation, a civil society organization. We especially work with the government and development partners to develop some policy guidelines and research as well. So we already made some collaboration with World Talent Economic, Forum, so that we can make some uh, good research with the full of researcher like you, and it's a fantastic way. It will be a fantastic way to go ahead with the good research and recommendation. However, so what we Green Tech Foundation, we are now focusing on to face the climate change challenges. We focused on the climate innovations for the next generations, because if we can adopt something which will be effective to face the environmental problem, and as well as the economical development, we can use as a tool. That will be our actually success for the, tools for the success. So in that case, we want your support as well to actually guide the young researcher and the young entrepreneur, especially the green entrepreneur who want to create some, the innovations for the climate, actions or climate the problems. They want to solve the climate issues with their innovations and with their ideas as a business model, so that it can be sustainable and it can be also support in the country economy as well for the GDP. So in that case, we can share you few very exciting innovations our young people made. Innovation I should I want to share with you. It was actually developed a product or a technology for the especially for the industries who produce the carbon, I mean the black smoke. So this technology can reduce the black smoke as a, I mean, clean wind, and it reduces around more than 95% carbon from the any industry. So this kind of innovations can help to face the climate issues, and I don't want to spend your more time. I love to joining with you, and I definitely note every points from every scholars. And since I'm representing one civil society organizations and research organizations, so I can I mean use this recommendation for the government level and the policymakers to make some decision out of the discussion.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Dr.
thank you, Mr. Sharif, Dr. Sharif, for inviting me, and I would like to thanks everyone to spending their valuable time, because everyone very senior people and you are very, I mean, learned people. So definitely your time is valuable. So again, I would like to thanks from the Green Foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Uh, uh, Professor Rob, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the big problem underneath climate change is probably the misinformation that surrounds both the causes and the remedies. Our race has trouble with strategic programs. We don't think strategically; we tend to think tactically, and that's why when we don't feel well, we often grab aspirin, which mitigates problems, as opposed to going to a doctor and find out what the cause of the problem is. Granted, a lot of times you go to the doctor to try to find the cause of a problem. They don't know any more than you do. But our tendency is to address the immediate pain, not focus on long-term benefits or things that are out over the horizon, with the horizon out over 12 months. That's problematic for managing companies. It's really problematic for managing the planet. Because the planet tends to move in century regions of time, elements of time, and our ability to affect the climate is very limited. So that means comparatively limited. We can't flip a switch and solve a climate change problem. It takes, to change the climate of the Earth, it takes for good or ill, it takes global effort. And right now the global effort isn't focused on climate at all. It's focused on economics, and the economics of climate change are ugly at the back end, and to correct it, they're ugly at the front end, because you've got a lot of companies, very powerful companies with money, that effectively are going to be out of business, and those companies are fighting for their own survival, and become the source, at least much of the source for climate denial. And without clean information, without a strategic focus at a global level, we're fooling ourselves to even thinking we can deal with climate change. A perfect example right now, with massive oil shortages, governments are focused on getting people more oil, as opposed to focused on getting them to an alternative energy source that may not be controlled, that may not have as much Russian or Saudi Arabia control, and becoming free of those sources. In fact, even if we put climate change aside, much of what we're talking about doing with regard to climate change is things we should be doing anyway. Limiting pollution has other benefits that are actually more current than climate change. And so our inability to focus strategically, and our inability to fight well-moneyed groups that are focused on caring or on preserving their livelihood is problematic. Our best bet right now is to look at mitigation, but the reality is we should be looking at major incentives to move the people that won't move to address climate change on the right side of this. And until we do that, we're going to have a lot of discussions like this one. We're going to have a lot less progress. And right now we're going backwards. I mean, with all the work that's gone into climate change, right now we're actually going backwards. If you look at the amount of crap we're putting into the atmosphere, it's now being reported as higher than it was pre-pandemic. And that's with a massive shortage of petrochemical products. So you scratch your head and say, okay, this is just the race doing incredibly stupid things, and that goes back to our problem is we just appear to be unable to focus on this problem strategically, and until we step back and do so, mitigation is our only short-term remedy, because that's all we can fund. But if we don't do mitigation right, that's going to fail as well. Several of the speakers have talked about people that are fleeing climate change, and it's growing in numbers. And a lot of the countries that are in existence today in 50 years won't be countries. They'll either be absorbed and be basically deserts and unlivable, or the governments will be overthrown in food riots, or they'll lose so many citizens they just simply won't be viable as a separate entity, as an independent state. Those are all probable outcomes of the mess we're in. Yet those same governments that are facing death and even more dire issues in terms of economic collapse, and we're certainly seeing certain countries report economic collapse today. It's as we're getting plenty of warning, but we're just simply not stepping up to the underlying problem. So the step number one really has to be to get everyone on the same page, and that means you have to critically look at the entities that are against fighting climate change and get them on the side of fighting climate change. If we don't do that, that's on the critical path. If we don't do that, it's not a multiple choice question. It's all of the above. And if we don't get those people on board, given their inordinate power, we won't be able to make progress. And so getting everybody on the same page becomes that, or at least a critical mass of people on the same page becomes the critical path to solving the underlying problem, whether you're mitigating the effects of climate change or trying to correct them, because even mitigation, which will require containing and protecting the populace, coming up with different ways to farm and create food, doing a better job of protecting the water supplies, the clean water supplies, and avoiding doing stupid stuff like we're doing with electric cars. For instance, with electric cars, the first phase should have been to make sure the electric grid was green. Second step would be to create energy storage that is highly efficient and safe. And then the third phase is move to electric cars when those elements are in place. But by doing it ass backwards, at least initially, we are creating avoidable climate problems in the process. Lithium and lead, our mines are doing a massive amount of damage. And while electric cars are marginally better than gas cars, they should be significantly better. And the issue is we haven't addressed the underlying problems with electric cars. We're moving to an electrical energy system from petrochemical system effectively, and so the impact we're going to have is going to be mixed, as opposed to be clearly in favor of addressing some of the underlying problems with regard to green gas emissions. So this really does require we look at this scientifically, prioritize, fund, and execute at a level that is unprecedented. And if we can't do that, we might as well just plan on living in the equivalent of climate bomb shelters, because the surface of the planet's not going to hang around that much longer, at least from the standpoint of worldwide timescales. If we don't start to address this aggressively, then our only remedy is to either move to another planet, which for the most part near term isn't really viable, since the planets around us are less habitable than our own, or go underground, or otherwise sequester the human race from the climate in order to address the problem. That's the more affordable option, but certainly not very desirable. And maybe perhaps we should be doing what we've often done to get people to buy insurance, which is also a strategic buy, is to start aggressively showing people what the world's going to look like in 10, 20, 50, 100 years if we don't do anything, or if we continue going down the wrong paths that we are today. That's a way to get the population on board with fixing the problem. Show them what the problem's going to cause, show them the misery they're going to have to experience, and then ask them for help in solving the underlying problem. But we seem to be unwilling even to do that. So in the end, I'm just thinking that climate change is a big problem that we probably won't even begin to truly seriously address until we start having to consider the fact that we're going to have to go subterranean. And I wish it could be another way, but I'm not seeing it at the moment.
Thank you. Mr. Sharidat Tatsuna, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Okay, let's see. What can I say? All right, so climate disasters are already embedded in the existing atmosphere. It's going to get worse. We only have maybe several more years before total runaway. All right, so it's not a question is should or can we do anything. No, we have to do it. Otherwise, we might as well just kiss off the future of civilization as we know it. All right. Now, that's why I focus on cities. Again, cities consume 80% of all energy. They are and on a radical side, you could say they're balanced to OPEC, the producers, and Russia and the United States even. So cities right now, C40 are organized, and many of the cities are organizing. I think the cities should not wait for nations and international agencies. They will never change. They will argue all day. Cities can move, and the good part is they're closer to the citizens and are closer to the climate activists who I view as the future leaders of your cities, to work together in a consortium between the citizens, we call them smart citizen scientists who understand climate science, and the city leaders to develop climate policies at the local level, local and bioregional levels, because usually you're dealing in bioregions. And that could be done fairly quickly because it's not like rocket science. I mean, everybody knows. Just talk to Nordics, the Nordic countries, Sweden and all. They already have done it 50 years ago. I wrote an article about it. So and you can work with the top brains around the world. You don't have to do it by yourself. You can't do it by yourself. Work with the top scientists and planners around the world, the top cities around the world, and together say, okay, what should Bangladesh do? And trust me, you'll be surprised how brilliant all these people are, citizens, leaders, and your scientists working together as a public-private kind of global partnership. Now that's the fastest way to go, right? Because without that, you'll never get foreign investment because you have to be validated. The KPIs have to be validated by the money, people's money on the top. And that's the 120, 30, 50 trillion dollars is sitting there looking for metrics. So that's what I would do right off the bat. Now, the other one, I'm Silicon Valley. I'm an entrepreneur. I tend to move fast. I don't waste time. Trouble with the climate, they just talk all the time. Just talk. All talk, no action. I like 90% action. So, all right, in terms of speed, use the social media. It's free. And set up channels like you're doing now and get everybody and develop discussions. And the fastest way to educate, the kids can do it together. Just get the smart kids through their classes, sharing it on social media. And you could educate children literally in less than a couple of months if you do it right. And get celebrities, local celebrities who care about the environment from Bangladesh to lead the children online. And if you do that and make it fun too, don't make it so grim because one of the problems is it's boring as hell. It's like abstract boring. I want to make it fun, interesting, and real and personal. So you can have young girls and young boys and their parents and mom and grandpa, doing things that are useful, like planting trees or gardens or doing something. And then the key is have fun and celebrate, all right? So celebrate your local culture, your Bangladesh, your local foods, your dance, everything, but green fashions, really good green foods, healthy foods. What are the best practices for healthcare? Show us. I want to see what Bangladeshis do as green leaders. I want to see it. I've never seen it. I've only seen, I hate to call it, it's called climate porn, more disasters. We see it all the time. I'm tired of seeing those things. I want to see positive stories coming out of Bangladesh created by local people, young people with their smartphones. All right. And you can do that like tomorrow. You don't need to wait 20 years. So move fast. And I like the idea, Mr. Rahman, is clubs. Silicon Valley, we had, the homebrew club. That's where the PCs and Apple came out of. It was all volunteers, fun, inventors, innovators. Organize lots of climate clubs doing fun things that are useful, permaculture, whatever. But do something. Don't just stand there and talk about it. And then the other one, my book is about it. One of the problems climate is viewed as a cost, not job creation. And the reason is that climate is a long-term problem, so that's why you don't see a return on investment. So I'm breaking down the barriers I call them bio-cities of the future, or bionic cities, which is the merger of climate, biomedicine, healthcare, bioresearch, high-tech, smart cities, and exponential technologies. Exponential technologies and biomedical are big industries with a lot of money already. That's where the jobs are. All right. So if you merge them together into one, then you unleash trillions of dollars of capital. But right now, if you just say climate, everybody goes, can't make any money on it. So again, it's the way you think about problems. That's the problem, that you've separated short-term and long-term opportunities. You said, please save the world 40 years from now. And all the investors are going, you're crazy. I'm looking for next year. So if you do biotech and exponential, then they say, okay, I can see I can make money. And then you'll be creating a lot of jobs. So that's what I would do. And to engage young people, volunteerism does not work. All right? Because it's only for rich people or people who are bored, no time. But it's not going to keep you, because once you need a job, you're just going to be gone. So you have to integrate the green job creation into your strategies. And it's a financing problem, okay? So think like business people in this case. Don't, we've heard the science. What's the finance? How do you do it? And all of us in the North are waiting for Bangladesh to give us ideas. Okay, trust me, I have not yet once ever heard of a KPI from Bangladesh about how you're going to monetize and quantify the SDGs. I've never heard of it. All I see is more disasters. I want to see real concrete, evidence. And that's kind of the way Silicon Valley thinks. But if you do that, trust me, Silicon Valley right now, we've got like $100 trillion of capital sitting around. We're looking at climate tech investments. And the global South is wide open right now in terms of a market. But we just can't figure out what the business models are, because you don't have any KPIs or metrics or anything. So you're not going to get our attention. You're just going to make us feel guilty. And don't, trust me, guilt tripping the North is not going to work. Don't make us feel guilty about something we have no control over. Rather, show us, how can we work together with you? Just like I did in Bangalore 30 years ago. How can we work together to create jobs and save the world? Now that's worth doing. And I think if you do that, everybody will jump in, because we like big challenges in Silicon Valley. We don't like boring stuff like another mobile app. We like big things, okay, that make a dent in the universe. So I think if you want to make a huge dent, Bangladesh, you need to show us exactly what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And then once you do that, then it's easy. But thank you so much.
Thank you for your excellent concluding remarks. Yes, just few points. Just World Talent Economy Forum, we are taking a lot of actions. I just want to share our team in offline. Beside this dialogue, we are growing very fast with our team. I just want to give a special thanks to my team, how they support World Talent Economy Forum. And another interesting point, World Talent Economy Forum actually zero cost organization. We do not have anything. Only we have human relationship, human values. All of the valuable people from around the world, they are actually supporting us. I do not have nothing. Only I do my job properly. With all of our speakers, they are contributing voluntarily, and we are moving forward. And most important thing is that I'm very happy we are getting this way thousand people from Asia Pacific. They are joining. They are supporting our projects. Let's say this Sunday, We have one of the largest event in Kuala Lumpur with all of the politicians, media persons, uh, thousands of people actually joining, businessmen and organization. And yes, our objective is human progression. We want to solve climate change related things. We want to create more jobs. We are producing 100,000 drone pilots. We are utilizing technologies. And trust me, I do not have nothing. All actually, people actually supporting World Talent Economy Forum, many business organizations, many good people, good organizations from Malaysia, from Singapore, from India, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from Bahrain, from Saudi Arabia, many of the from Africa, many of the people actually joining in our revolutions. One of the things I just want to share with our audience, if you have a good things in your minds, if you are hardworking, and if you want to contribute for your people, definitely people going to support us. That is the visions. And I want to welcome you all in our all of the exclusive event and activities. And I'm sure it's a new world, and you will be very happy how we are getting support from all of the people. Yes, Malaysian government, I want to give them special thanks. All of the NGOs and organizations, those who are working with us, I want to give you special thanks. But trust me, only we have goodwill. We do not have nothing. So this is important for everyone. Yes, creating jobs, finance, everything important. But one thing I learned from my parents: if you have good wish, uh, if you if you can do the hard works, then whole world run behind you to support you. So that is the way actually World Talent Economy Forum growing. So we are engaging with millions of people in Asia Pacific. So thank you for all of your support. Now I request Professor Donald for final remarks.
Well, thank you. Um, I do want to say that there is quite a lot of work on the quantum mechanics of global warming. It's fun. It's just funny because for the last few days I've been deeply reading about quantum fields. One of these days I'm going to understand it, but the math is daunting. But nonetheless, the biggest greenhouse gas is water. And so the man-made greenhouse gases like CO2 raise the temperature some, but then that creates more water vapor, which then makes it hotter, which creates more water vapor. And so water vapor is a well-known absorber of infrared. And anyway, what I was really interested in, what Lufor was saying about the idea of basically trying to do entrepreneurial solutions and driving an entrepreneurial culture. Because I've been in Silicon Valley forever, and it goes back to what I was saying, and I'm going to kind of put it into a recommendation point. I work with a university group in Finland, and we have a relationship with Stanford. And the particular research area is persuasive technology. So it's basically how technology changes people's attitudes and behaviors. And when the discipline was starting, one of the things that really helped us make it happen was that we started having conferences on that subject. And at conferences, people give papers, and we started to develop an interest in that area. And there already is interest in, obviously, climate change. And so one investment that a country could make is just really realize how important that the relationships that their universities have with universities in other places in the world are. Because your people go and interact with them, and then they interact with you. Because you are going to run into problems that other people haven't run into yet. And I think if you want to say the simplest thing about what a good entrepreneur does at the basic line is they solve a problem. They solve, when you're listening to somebody give a elevator speech or anything, the first thing you want to hear is, what problem are you trying to solve? And that goes back to what you were saying, is that it's sort of a blessing that you have so many problems, some of these problems. You're like the first line that can run into them. And I totally agree with what Fred said. I mean, the latrines are only, a stopgap to where you really need to go. But they are a stopgap. Bangladesh jumped in front of India in health because of doing that. And so these are the kinds of solutions that entrepreneurs can turn into things that can be used globally. And but it really has to go back to what Sheridan said, is that, KPI means key performance indicators. Basically, the question is how do you show somebody that what you've done actually has some value? And that's goes back into what I'm talking about with the relationships with the universities, because these metrics are being developed right now. And in order for any one of us to be able to be up to date on these metrics and to have influence on what these metrics are, we have to be involved in the organizations that are doing it. And that's, when I was working at Hewlett Packard, they would send one of us, to every single solitary standards organization. They would have somebody sitting there at the table, making sure they understood what the new standards were, and then saying from their own perspective what they'd like the standards to be, so it would be the most beneficial to Hewlett Packard. And all the big companies were doing it. I mean, sitting across the table was IBM and so on like that. And that's what's important, to be sure you have a seat at the table. But the key about it is you don't know what you don't know. And so the investment that you make part of the investment that you make in education has to be making sure that you have the resources for your university students and the people at your universities to develop relationships with other universities around the world, so that you can keep up to date with what's the latest that's going on. I want to say one more thing about that. When I go to conferences, to academic conferences, I learn more at the pub than I do listening to the talk. Because scientists, when I get papers, and I have to be so careful that I don't say absolutely anything that hasn't been, vetted and blah, blah, blah. And I don't get to say what I really think. I don't get to say what really drove me to do this, where I think it's going, why it is that I'm studying this and learning it. And as Fred gave me a thumbs up, because that's when you go to the pubs, the people they'll start telling you what they really think, what they really found out, and that's the bellwether about what's to be able to detect what's going on. So then from there you start to know where to look. And so I can't emphasize, that's my research at Stanford was about the social networks in Silicon Valley, and how the networks in Silicon Valley helped make Silicon Valley what it is. And innovation takes place when people take something from one place and use it somewhere else. I mean, it doesn't just come full blown out of nothing. And so because of that, Bangladesh has an incredible opportunity to be able to innovate in the mitigation areas that we're really wondering about. And back to what Sheridan says, that's got to get funded somehow. And so that goes back to what I'm saying about the importance of trying to understand and help develop the metrics that are going to be able to be used to decide whether something you're doing is actually working or not. And I know that's kind of general, but I mean, on this show, I don't want to drill down into super specifics. So we can always talk about it later.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Frank, what's your concluding remarks for today?
So listening to this was a great discussion. A couple of the things that were brought up with how do we stop fossil fuel companies lobbying against? Well, there's no climate change will kill us in a couple decades, but if you take an entire industry's livelihood away from them and by banning it or telling them to change without offering an alternative, you kill them now, and so they will fight you tooth and nail. Like, imagine somebody's trying to take food out of your children's mouth, and that is literally how hard they will attack anything you put forth until you present an alternative. You have to provide them with an alternative. You have to provide them with a way out before they will ever support an initiative that you take. And that's a lot of people get this wrong. So we keep repeating the same steps, expecting different results. It's, another thing, until the economics of a plan makes sense, it's not a solution. Until then, it's just an idea. So your economics of it has to make sense first and foremost, and then can it become a solution. If the industry can get behind it, people can enter into it without having to put themselves out, and that is essentially how things become met. It's been a really a great discussion. I'm thankful to have been here with all of you, and pleasure to meet you. Thanks for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you. Mr. Dr. Lutfur Rahman, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, thank you. Actually, already discussed so many things, and definitely we have to concentrate on the innovations and the future generations. Here the advice from the everyone's Sheridan and Donald also said a very fantastic, recommendation, some important things. So we have to say and say that yes, we talk a lot about the climate issues, but we have now we need to go for action. So from everyone, every side, we need to take some actions and initiatives. In that case, definitely we should emphasize on the awareness and the capacity building of the people, as well as the people like the vulnerable countries like Bangladesh and the other countries. People should understand and should build themselves to fight against the climate crisis. So in that case, the awareness and capacity building should be the priority, and also the innovations as well. So I would like to invite all of the researchers to find and recommend some few very specific things for our country, so that we can, go ahead with that recommendations for action, taking actions. And in that case, the World Talent Forum, what they are playing a very vital role. You repeated several times that you have nothing, but I think you have a very good resource, which is very valuable in a sense, and which is very a big asset for you. And as well as the Creative Foundation and other civil society organizations like us, we are here working with the government and the other stakeholders for developing the policy guideline, and also supporting them to implement the recommendations from you like researchers. So again, I would like to thank the organizing, especially to Sharif, and definitely if we can, this is also very important to face the crisis with the regular basis, with discussions and debate. This kind of forum is very important for facing the challenges of the climate. So
Thank you.
again I would like to thanks for
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lutfur Rahman, Professor Fred Philip, Professor Sharidan Tatsuno, Professor Donald, and Mr. Frank for joining today's sessions. And I want to request all of you, please support the developing nations, especially I know in Bangladesh, in Sylhet, they have a lot of disasters, natural disasters, especially flood and many things happening. Yes, the local community actually supporting, but I request the global community, if you can, you should support Bangladesh, India, and other countries, those who have flood and these kind of things. And beside that, I request all of the policymakers, please support the talent people. Talent people know that how to develop solution, what actually Professor Sharidan Tatsuno share from Silicon Valley. So I'm sure we have a lot of resources, especially human resources. They can help developing nations. They can contribute for the developing nation, but developing nations need to know that how they seek their help and support from the developed world. So I request all of the think tanks, Central Bank of Bangladesh, and all of the valuable organizations from Bangladesh. You can collaborate more through World Talent Economy Forum, and I'm sure the developed nations can contribute more. And beside that, next month we have very special conference with Energy Ministry of Bangladesh. So hopefully it will be very interesting projects. And I share already that next year, March 27 to 29. In India, we are launching one of the largest conference, Nikola Tesla Technology Conference. We already invite around 25,000 scientists from around the world, and hopefully this event can help us to engage with a lot of grassroots level people. And that is the things. Thank you for joining today's sessions, and I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agencies, with corporation, and with academy. And especially we have resources, those who can contribute for policy research and policy developments. So I request Central Bank of Bangladesh, Green Tech Foundations, you can collaborate with these resources. They can help a lot to create more value-based society and knowledge-based society, which is important for Bangladesh. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.